Hello, everybody. My name is Joshua Lozeau, and today I'm going to do my presentation on autism. What is autism? Autism is a neurobehavioral spectrum disorder. Well, what does this mean? Let's talk about spectrum disorder first. So, a spectrum disorder is when, let's say, you have a disorder, and this disorder is caused by a spectrum of reasons, a plethora of reasons. There is no one single reason that causes autism. Instead, it's many different factors that play into why autism happens. Um, and because autism is a neurobehavioral disorder, um, a person with autism's brain is going to be affected differently. Their brain is going to operate differently, and it's going to act, I guess, abnormally from a normal, quote unquote, normal person. And so, let's say a more simplified way, there are many different reasons that cause autism. All these reasons contribute together to make to change the way that a person's brain works and to change the way that a person's brain looks. And because the person's brain looks differently and acts differently, they'll have different behavior. They may show this kind of symptom. They may show that kind of symptom. They may be more angry most of the time. They might flap their arms in the air more different, like more normal, like more than other people. And so, there's many different symptoms that could happen from these different causes. And because of that, um, depending on how much symptoms you have, depending on how badly you have autism, you are grouped into two different categories. You either have Asperger's syndrome or you have Kenner syndrome. A person with autism grouped in the Asperger's syndrome category is considered a high functioning autistic, while a person with Kenner syndrome is a low functioning autistic. If you are a person with Kenner syndrome, then your degree of autism will be more severe than if you were to have Asperger's syndrome. So a person with Asperger's syndrome, to put it in context, well, they have autism, but their symptoms don't really affect them that much in life, and so they get to live a more independent life. They get to live a more normal life where they get to live by themselves and do things by themselves. They get to be essentially a lot more independent. While people with Kenner syndrome will have to they are a lot more dependent. They're going to need a lot more resources in order to help them live life and live life well and healthily. Now, a person with autism, their personality is affected in three different categories, or can be affected in different categories. One, they can be affected in their social interaction, either their communication or their behavior. And one of these three categories, a person with autism may show like an abnormality, let's say social interaction. If you're talking to a person with social interaction, or you're just taught like meeting a person with social interaction, one sign that they have autism is that they avoid eye contact. When you look them in the eyes, they don't look at you. They're looking at the ground. They're looking at the sitting. They're looking in space. They're looking at something else. Um, and not only that, but they might have difficulty reading or displaying facial emotions. And so, let's say I have autism and I look at you and you're smiling at me. I think even though you're smiling at me, I don't really register that you're smiling. So I'm not sure that you're happy or not, or displaying my facial emotions. So um, I look like I'm sulking. I have a sad look on my face. I may have a sad look on my face, but on the inside, I feel really happy. And that's one thing where a person could just have difficulty displaying their facial emotions. They may subconsciously have like a sad look on their face when really they might be happy. And similarly, person with autism may have inappropriate body posture. So let's say a person with autism goes to an interview. They have their suit, everything's decked out, everything's nice. They look great. The only thing is that they have an inappropriate body posture. They are kind of sulking their body. They're flailing their arms side to side. They look like they don't care at all. And it's not like you can really blame them and be like, well, this person, why do you like the interviewer could come out and say, well, why do you look like that? You look like you don't care? But the person with autism may not may subconsciously have that body posture. They might have that body language that shows that, hey, I this person looks like they don't care, even though person with autism actually does care. Um, Another sign of autism is a lack of reciprocity. Reciprocity, for those who don't know, is the idea of give and take. And so let's say I am going to give you my book, and in return, I expect you to give me my book back. And so, well, you give a person with autism your book, they think, okay, it's my book now. They don't get the book back because they don't understand the idea of they may not understand reciprocity. Um, Another thing about autism is that normally people with autism will have a lot more priority on their self-interests, their personal priorities rather than the interest of group activities. And so um, they will have a lower interest in group activities because they tend to think more of, well, what's going to benefit me, not what's going to benefit everybody else. Um, and two different signs that you can see in kids, at least, as far as like social interaction goes. Well, for parents, if they were to like do peekaboo with their child, a game of peekaboo with a child, a good sign of autism is if, well, let's say a dad says peekaboo, the child doesn't react at all, like no reaction whatsoever. That's a sign that autism is gonna be evident. Another thing is not comforted by touch. So mom gives a hug to a kid with autism who's crying, and the kid is not comforted by the touch. And in fact, the kid is made uncomfortable by the touch, and it gets even more sad, or it gets like frustrated, saying, "Don't touch me." And then there's communication. So one thing in developmental stages is that people with autism, they could never start talking at all. They could be mute throughout their whole lives, or you know, in the middle of, like, let's say they're 6 years old and they've been talking the whole time. Well, now they're not talking anymore. They're not talking for the rest of their lives. Um, but let's say, okay, you're talking to someone with autism. Well, things you can notice is that they could have echolalia. And so what echolalia is, let's say I say, "Hi, how are you doing?" Person with autism responds, "Doing." And that doesn't make any sense, but they are echoing what I'm saying. And that's echolalia. Um, Another thing is a person with autism may have difficulty taking turns in conversation. Um, and they may have a difficulty taking perspective of the listener. So you are telling a person a story, and the person with autism will they interrupt your story, and they talk more about, okay, this is what I want to talk about, and that sounds rude, but it's kind of like subconscious. It's not like they're trying to be rude; it's just subconsciously doing that. As far as taking the perspective of the listener, um, that might be it could be an issue with empathizing. So you're telling a person, well, I just got kicked out of the house, or I'm having a lot of issues paying my bills. Um, and the person with autism will, they may not like understand how you feel because they don't really understand your point of view. They don't have the empathy to understand you. And then there is a difficulty in understanding and responding to humor and understanding innuendo. Normally, when you say something to a person with autism, let's say you say a joke that has innuendo. Innuendo is like hints and stuff, like metaphors, like figure of language. Um, it could be figurative language. So I say, your dog looks like a mop. And a person with autism may take that literally, and they're like, my dog looks like a mop. Or you could say your dog is a mop, and the person with autism is like, oh, my dog is a mop, really? So it's like taking things literally and not understanding innuendo, not understanding humor. And then there's behavior. So if you see a person from far, uh, they're fidgeting with toys, they they're rocking back and forth like they're in the chair more than normal. They're flapping their arms, they're flapping their legs. Those could be those could be like signs that okay, this person might have autism. I mean, you can't really tell immediately, but like normally if they're just walking back and forth more than normal or flapping their arms and legs or fidgeting with toys, that's a sign that hey, this person might have autism. Um, Another thing is if you take a person with autism outside of the environment that they find comfortable and that they feel familiar with, they might feel they could get really uncomfortable and get really fussy outside of an environment that is different from what they're used to. Another thing is hypersensitivity or lack of awareness. You're talking to a person with autism, they may hear you. It's like, hey, you need to take care of the dishes, or hey, you got to go over there and drive your car to this place. Well, they may hear you, but they are preoccupied with something else, and so they hear you, they understand you, they just don't really care because they're more occupied with something else. And then there's hypersensitivity. Well, hypersensitivity. Let me see. I give you a ghost pepper. And you have autism. I give you a ghost pepper. You have hypersensitivity to spice, and so when you eat this ghost pepper, you go crazy because you feel it's 10 times hotter than normal, 10 times hotter than how normal people feel it. But I was talking a whole lot about how Savant syndrome could be bad. I mean, how autism could be bad, but um, one good thing that can appear from autism is this thing called Savant syndrome. So Savant syndrome is this thing where people will have like a high affinity in one area of expertise. They'll be really, really good at one thing. They could be an amazing pianist or a genius mathematician. They could be a person like Albert Einstein making all these equations and figuring all these crazy things and finding it easy to understand all these things because they have savant syndrome. But the only bad thing though, the only drawback is normally when people have savant syndrome, um, they tend to be like really good at one thing, but then bad at everything else. And so like, let's say I'm a really good pianist, but I'm a savant at being at the piano, but I'm a savant. I'm bad at everything else. I'm bad at talking to people. I'm bad at understanding money. I'm bad at understanding math, but I'm really good at the piano. So that's the drawback is that, even though you're really good at one thing, you're kind of bad at a lot of other things, normally. So we talked a lot about the signs, what the person looks like, and what types of autism there are, but we haven't talked about the causes. And so, if we talk about the causes of autism, well, let's talk about it. So, autism is mainly either affected by genetics or environment, and usually autism is like hugely affected by genetics, like hugely affected by genetics. But one thing is that autism is like there's no single reason why autism happens. Like I said earlier, it's like there's no one gene that will tell you, okay, this gene codes for autism. No, that's not a thing. There can be genes that contribute to autism, but there are genes that determine autism. But, talking about genetics can have a high impact on autism. Let's look at boys versus girls in autism. Well, statistically speaking, boys are 4 to 5 times more likely than females to get autism. One explanation behind this is that if you look at the difference between males and females, males are different from females because of their sex chromosomes. Males have what's called XY sex chromosomes, and females have XX chromosomes. And so you can think of their chromosomes as like tickets, for example. Both males and females have have at least one X chromosome. And so this will each like the X chromosome will represent like a ticket. And so there's a trait in this ticket that what is it? There's a trait in this ticket that will increase your chance of autism. Now, if you win the lottery, if you don't have like if you have like what is it, an X chromosome that doesn't have traits that will increase your likelihood of autism, then you'll be good. You don't have autism. But females have two X chromosomes. They have two chances where it's like, oh, well, this one over here increases my likelihood of autism, but this one doesn't, and this one takes precedence. But males only have one X chromosome. I only have one ticket to let me not have autism. If I win this raffle, I don't have autism. but only have one chance, while females have two different chances. Two different chances. Um, and now let's talk about heritability in twin studies. So in twin studies, if you have like two different people, let's say this is John and David. If one of them has autism, then there's an 80% chance that this guy will have autism. John has autism. There's an 80% chance that David will have autism as well. And so it's pretty evident over here, that with boys versus girls and the twin studies, that genetics does have a friggin' big role in determining your chances of having autism. But now let's look at the environment, how environment can affect the way that you can affect the way your chances of having autism. So let's go look at cities. So in cities where a lot of the jobs are in the information technology sector, autism rates are 2 times higher. And why is this the case? Well, the reason why this is the case is because, I mean, um, if you look at it, people in the information technology sector are more connected to their computers. They have a lot more interactions with the computers rather than social communication. They don't really talk to each other. They talk more. They use more computers more. And so when you leave less time to talk to people and to develop like a sense of empathy and to develop a sense of social connection, um, then when you leave less time for social connection, then you you give yourself higher chances of having autism because you won't develop your emotional part of your brain, the more sympathetic part of your brain more. Um, and another thing that can affect autism is how mothers treat their babies during pregnancies. And so, moms who, smoke, or moms who are exposed to dangerous chemicals like pollution. Well, when they're pregnant, this can affect their babies and it could give them neurodevelopmental issues. Now, this doesn't say, okay, if a mom smokes, then I'm gonna have autism. Instead, it can lead to what's called co-occurring conditions. And the thing about co-occurring conditions, or what co-occurring conditions are, they're like conditions like depression, epilepsy, and ADHD, neurodevelopmental um, conditions. And the thing that's bad about that is that if you look at the statistics, 70% of autistics have co-occurring conditions like depression, epilepsy, and ADHD. And so, I mean, it's pretty obvious, it's pretty evident to say that, moms should stay away from smoking if they want to prevent their children from having autism or from even having all these neurodevelopmental issues. So we talked a lot about the causes, you know, the the signs of autism, but we haven't said a whole lot about diagnosing autism. So there are 3 different ways that people diagnose autism. There's a clinical investigation, there's an MRI, and there's this thing called a magnetoencephalography. So clinical investigation is where a bunch of medical providers will work together and triage in order to figure out if a person has autism. Now, this is a long process because there's no definitive reason why autism happens. Instead people have to look at a plethora of different things. Okay, you have to look at your family history. I'm going to look at the way that you were treated during pregnancy. I'm going to look at the way that you grew up. I'm going to look at your psychiatric history, whether you had depression before. I'm going to look at the way your parent copes, because the way your parent is will kind of like, you grow up with your parent and that reflects on who you are. And so it's a clinical investigation throughout many years to figure out, okay, does my son, does my daughter, does my parent have autism? And they look through like a bunch of different resources to figure out, okay, I see a click over here, I see a click over here, I see a click over here, and I see a click over here. I think this person has autism. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna devise a plan to try to help this person throughout their special circumstance to alleviate their symptoms of autism. Another way that they, like I said, you triage in order to figure out if someone has autism. One of the things that they could use is this thing called an MRI. It's called magnetic resonance imaging. And now, what magnetic resonance imaging is it's like you go to a hospital, and it's just like the circular machine that there's like a circular machine and a bed, and you go through that bed, and the machine uses magnets to find like a picture of your brain, to look at your brain and kind of identify what's up with your brain. And the reason why MRIs are used for autism is that as people grow up with autism, they will experience they'll experience like different developmental changes as opposed to other people. When a person with autism is like from 6 to 24 months old, they will have neuroinflammation. Inflammation Neuroinflammation is inflammation in your brain, and not only will they have neuroinflammation, they will have an enlarged amygdala. Amygdala is a part of your brain that's responsible for emotion and memory. And so when they look at an MRI, when medical providers look at an MRI and they see, oh, this person's 10 months old and they have a huge amygdala and they have neuroinflammation, that's a sign of, hey, this person could have autism. Not only that, but like I said, this is a multiple years progress, multiple year process thing. And so as a person with autism grows up later in life, they'll have this thing called well, they'll have growth in their prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex is like right over here. And when you use an MRI to see, okay, this person's prefrontal cortex is much different from other people's. It's a lot bigger from other people's. And not only this person's prefrontal cortex is bigger than others, he's expressing a lot of symptoms of autism. Then it kind of points to, hey, I think this person has autism. But not only that, there's another one. There's magnetoencephalography. Magnetoencephalography is this machine that will figure out the electrical impulses in your brain, whether you're using this part of your brain or that part of your brain or this part of your brain. And one thing that people that researchers have found and studies is that, okay, so normally people when they're using their brain are gonna have global electrical pulses. I'm gonna use this part of my brain and this part of my brain together. I'm gonna use parts of my brain all over. But when people with autism have local, like people with autism tend to have local electrical impulses. And what that means is that instead of using all different parts of my brain, I tend to use this part of my brain only. And this kind of points to why, what is it, Savant Syndrome is a thing. Let's say this part of my brain is the math part of my brain. I use this part of my brain all the time. And so because I use this part of my brain all the time, I'm really good at math. And so that could point to why Savant syndrome is a thing. But all in all, people with like when you could see that normally only one part of the brain is being used, it points to, okay, this person could have autism. Now, to treat autism, in order to treat autism, it's a tricky situation. It's not like there's one cure to autism because there's many different causes to autism. Instead, if you want to treat autism, a person who has autism, um, you have to figure out how to coach them and medicate them the right way. If a person is depressed, you give them SSRIs or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, um, or you could coach them. You have to be like, okay, because you don't understand empathy, let me teach you empathy. Um, and this coaching is not only improves upon weaknesses like empathy, something like that, but they build upon strengths. A person has Savant syndrome, and you take that as an opportunity to build upon their strengths. You're a great pianist. Let's use that. Let's use that opportunity to make you an even better pianist. But because you don't understand how to interact with people, we will teach you how to interact with people. And like I said, medications are tailored to each individual. There are many different reasons why a person could have autism. A person with autism could have uh, different people with autism. Well, different people with autism may have different co-occurring conditions. One may have ADHD. One may have depression. One may have let's see, epilepsy. And so you would have to tailor medications to each individual to account for their symptoms or signs and their co-occurring conditions, everything that makes their autism what it is. But that's my presentation. I hope you like it, and I hope you learned something new. Thank you for allowing me to be in this Omni presentation, and have a good day.